So, Reggie,
Yes.
where do you want me to start? I mean, there's so much to you. I don't know where to start. It's like you're multiple people. You said you're not bisexual.
I'm not bisexual.
So now we have that out.
Although I wish I could be.
Because that would double your chances for a date,
It
wouldn't
will
it?
double my chances, and maybe after this festival, maybe after Split This Rock, I'll find a husband.
I think that's a great thing.
So I do everything else, but finding a husband has been that. But I just feel in terms of the entity of being a poet, for myself, I'd have to wear lots and lots of hats.
You know, when I think about you, I think of you in so many different hats. Like we said earlier, I don't think of you as just a poet. You're a performer. You're someone that is very entertaining. You're a comedian. You're all these things. What do you see yourself?
I guess an entertainer with a serious message.
Okay.
Perhaps. I mean, I love writing poems, but I have to perform. And so, look, if I was in Miss Saigon, the musical, then I wouldn't be a poet. So I auditioned 3 times, didn't get in, and I guess that was fortunate because that's when I wrote poems. And so I wanted to perform.
That was a terrible Broadway show.
It is a terrible Broadway show.
But hey, it's Broadway.
But see, if that's what your hopes, if that's what the only thing that you can aspire to as an Asian actor,
Wow.
is Miss Saigon,
Yeah.
and like in your heart knowing that this is a little weird, I don't know that I could do it.
Wow.
I would rather perform my poems than do
But-
Miss Saigon.
But you're not Vietnamese.
But I can.
But you could.
Yeah, I could pass.
And I understand you could even pass for Japanese at times.
Exactly, like I'm Meryl Streep. We're all Japanese. We're all Chinese. You know, we're all Asian people inside. But you know, I would not. If I didn't have poetry, I wouldn't have any kind of artistic career. Because if I didn't have that, I'd either have tried to get into law school or be a massage therapist. That was my option.
A lot of lawyers become massage therapists. Yeah,
Well,
that's what happens.
that's what I'm looking for, a lawyer who's a massage therapist. That's the guy for me.
That's the right and the left coming together.
And it's hard to find the right and the left in DC.
You're absolutely right. Now, you came to DC about 10 years ago,
About 10 years ago, yeah.
and you were going to work for a nonprofit here.
I got a job opportunity, interviewed here. I thought I was never going to leave New York. Actually, because I'm from DC. So I left here when I was 18, and I was doing theater.
You ran away from here when you were 18.
I ran away. I could have stayed in DC, and you know, the theater community was really supportive. It was all about non-traditional casting, and the community was great. But I left, and I didn't know if I would come back to DC. I'm like, well, I will commute back and forth, and I totally got sucked in.
You're into the bi thing, aren't you?
Yes, yes.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, totally. I was, for a little bit, I was bi-city.
Yeah.
I was in New York and DC, and then eventually I just stayed in DC. Actually, when I was interviewed, I went to Busboys Poets. I think it was maybe a few months old. It was packed, and I thought, this is incredible. This is a space where poetry, where spoken word culture can really can grow and blossom. I mean, the area was just right. The poetry community was converging in such a way that, you know, with all of the good feeling, only poetry could erupt. So for me, I needed to move to a city that had a strong poetry base.
I mean, DC's always had a poetry base of sorts, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Langston Hughes, and
Yeah,
yes, in the Harlem Renaissance, or, you know, the Renaissance time, there's a strong poetry community, but I think that DC never, prior to Busboys, and I think over the last 10 years, DC has really evolved to being the platform for poetry and spoken word. It has invited many writers and poets. The slam scene in the youth and in the adults has exploded to national, international championships. So I'm all happy for that, because for me, slam poetry is like, it's an American art form like jazz. And so DC, the nation's capital, should have a strong spoken word culture, because slam poetry is political theater.
And for those that may be watching this and don't know what slam poetry is, what is slam poetry?
It is, it's a genre of performance poetry where a poet has 3 minutes to perform their work before an audience, and they get scored 0 to 10. And like the Olympics. And so there's no props, no costumes. You don't have to improvise, but the beauty of slam is that it asks poets to, one, be pointed, what do you really want to say, and it makes poetry accessible and
fun.
And fun.
I mean, I think that's the thing about it, is a lot of people that come here have never been exposed to poetry, maybe, but they are exposed to a slam, and it's exciting. It's like the gladiators coming on the stage.
Right.
You know, it's really. I remember watching some of the slam poetry that we did not very long ago over at the Sixth and I Synagogue,
Yep.
where they had the finals.
The individual slam.
Yeah, the individual
Yes.
slam, the individual world slam poetry, and it was, people were scalping tickets outside.
Yeah.
It was crazy. You know, no one would ever imagine there's a poetry event going inside, you know?
And where people were scalping tickets to go in, yeah. I mean, you know, that is probably the highest event of, you know, slam poets from all over the world coming with their best 4 or 5 poems. So, you know, but the thing is, what do you want to say? You have 3 minutes to say something. Yeah. What do you want to say? And the fact that it's just really simple, there's no costumes, no music, no props. And that's why it's political theater, because I think people forget that we have freedom of speech and what that means. So I think we take it for granted, but in the poetry slam, that's where I feel freedom of speech and art converge. So
interesting. Well, when we first started the poetry program here at Busboys and Poets, there was this big conversation about whether spoken word has any place in the kind of the poetry scene, the you know, highbrow poetry scene. And so there's always been this tension between spoken word, slam poetry, literary poetry, all of that. Can you help me understand how those worlds converge, and are there firewalls between them where people say, you know, you're not a real poet, you're a performer?
Yeah, I think it's there's a thing of, and this is also in theater too, academic privilege and how poets' works get selected. And you have an academic hierarchy, or even in the way that plays are selected. You know, you go to Yale School of Drama, you write your play, public theater picks it up, and then it becomes this channel of how do we find our artists and how do we find our voices. I do think that people who come from the academic privilege or that world will look at the slam poets who are really inspiring, performing their guts out in the coffee houses while the cappuccino machine is blasting. You know, they're sort of envious with the kinds of crowds that slam poets can muster. And I think that, you know, slam poets or performance poets are looking at the other side where people have these beautiful lecture halls, and it's you know, people want both. And it's hard to retain credibility when you do perform, because people are like, well, you perform, you can't possibly write your poems, or they can't be poetry. What you do is performance. That was a good monologue. That wasn't poetry. So, you know, it's really funny how, you know, poetry is a religious thing. People feel passionate, or this is poetry, this isn't poetry. Oh, that's not a real poet. This is, and I'm really sick of that, you know. I think it's better in this country. I think that we're creating youth who love poetry and understand the performance of it, and it's been building, and the community has been really supportive, and it's the younger poets who embody the performance and their writing. So, but I don't know where that puts Uncle Reggie after 25 years of doing slam. I'm totally amazed that I can still do this after like 25 years of poetry, performing, traveling, teaching, because it's not something that I thought I would do, but I can't do anything else.
Well, you do it well. Split This Rock started about 6-7 years ago?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Something like that.
And kind of really created or codified DC as the poetry capital of the United States, basically. Poets from all over the country, all over the world, come for this festival that's biannual. Here we go, bi again.
Right.
And what's the significance of having a poetry festival like Split This Rock here in DC?
First of all, Split This Rock is an unprecedented gathering of passionate, politically charged, eloquent artists who are trying to show that poetry can be more than just the chandeliered pretty thing the roots of it, when Sarah Browning was thinking about starting this festival, was not only to make DC this national home, but also to bring the resources of DC together, so that way we can welcome all of these poets on the international, national, and local level. I think it's hard to find I guess in the art of it, the politics gets forgotten, and there's no way for poets to really push the envelope and to really gather on a lot of social or national issues. So when Sarah Browning asked about this, and Melissa Tuckey, we were the founding board members, I was like, yes, we've got to do this. And when I was moving to DC, I wanted that home to happen. And Split This Rock has always celebrated the slam poets. It tries to embrace all styles of poetry. And so that's also rare to see the blend, because I don't think a lot of festivals really look at the spoken word community and that grassroots community. The slam community operates as its own entity, and a lot of the other literary organizations aren't going to come to a nationals and seek talent in that way. So Split This Rock has been great, also in terms of supporting the DC Youth Slam team, its education workshops, and a lot of young poets want to be a part of it. I get calls from young poets who want to get started, and they want to come to DC, and they want to be an intern at Split This Rock, so that's incredible.
And Split This Rock also has a specific mission. It's poetry of provocation
and witness.
Of witness. And I think that's an important element too. So it's political poetry. And some people would say that and I think that was what Laura Bush did,
right.
Sort of gave that big, huge push for poetry in a sense by saying politics and poetry have no business being together.
Yeah.
And that was during the Iraq War when poets were invited to the White House.
Yeah.
And that sort of started this ball rolling of Poets Against the War, and then DC Poets Against the War that was started by Sarah Browning,
right.
which then gave the genesis to Split This Rock.
Right, exactly. But poems are political.
Absolutely.
All poems.
Absolutely.
All poems are political. So that's totally. She obviously doesn't get what poetry is, because poetry is a personal story. It's an individual's voice, and the personal is political, and she's totally missing the point. And it's freedom of speech. So
yeah.
You know, it's so that was troublesome. That was troublesome. But I would say since then, the Obama administration, Obama's made the White House very welcoming. Over the last years, I've been invited to several events at the White House. That wouldn't have happened. You know, when I came in, the Obama administration was just about to start. And so I think that we've been thriving through that with the art, with the culture here in DC.
One of the first events I think that they hosted was a poetry event where they invited poets to come and do spoken word. I remember it was a beautiful event.
Yeah, they didn't invite me, but it's okay.
That's all right. You've been invited since. Yeah, that's good. The thing also I think about poetry that's important for people to understand in many parts of the world, that's how revolutions begin, because it's subversive, right? It's like art. People either get it or they don't, and people who are looking for that change will see things in poetry that maybe other people who are, you know, satisfied with the way things are may not notice.
Right.
And therefore you can actually speak a language that touches a lot of people in a much deeper way than just plain old writing.
Exactly. It's immediate. It's even faster than photography, and you don't have to develop it. You can just pass.
Because the brain has the ability to create photographs out of words, right?
Exactly. So the fastest thing that you have is poetry to express whatever is happening. That's all you have. You know, you don't need any paints or anything.
I've never thought of that. And we have a program here that you host with Photo Week.
Yes. It was the photography slam.
Yeah, the photography slam. Exactly.
Let's slam an image and score it, which is great because you're getting. It's weird to see how photographs can get oohs and ahs and applause.
Yes.
Nobody claps for the photo, you know. So yes, the photography and the poetry. It just makes for, the slam makes for an interesting show. People are on the edge of their seat. It's, you know, somebody's going to win, someone's going to lose. You know, it's its own reality competition show where it's just where we're at. But you know, for me, going back to poetry, that's why I love teaching it. So a lot of the time I spend in classrooms giving workshops. And you know, sometimes I'll work with fifth graders, and I get them to go edgy. I get these fifth graders to go a little bit edgy. Sometimes I'll write about Red Bull and thongs or something. I didn't tell them to do that, but that's where their imagination went. So, but for me, everyone's got a story, and I know. Growing up, nobody wanted to hear the gay Filipino story. So, you know, in my poetry, that's where I try to put that experience out there, and also the celebratory aspects of being a gay man. Even though I write about loneliness a lot, you know, growing up in the '90s, there was a lot of tragic gay poetry. Oh, I'm gay, you know. And James Baldwin, it was just so sad, and like, you know, it was just so sad. And I'm like, no, there's actually fun stuff. And I think poetry should be
You put the gay in gay.
I bring the gay. I put the gay in the gay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of humor, you know, and I think that's important. And I think what's wrong with being funny as a poet? Oh, well, you're funny. You're a funny poet. You can't really be serious. But I think even if you are funny, it's harder to be funny because you're really absorbing that pain, and then you're trying to flip it.
Well, to me, people that are serious are funny.
Yeah.
It's like really? You taking life that seriously?
Right.
Yeah. Is it possible, you say you're a teacher and you teach young kids poetry, can everybody do poetry?
Yes, I
Really?
think so, yeah.
Oh.
I
think everyone is a secret poet, but a lot of people don't like to share their work.
And that's what I'm really good at. I'm really good at getting someone to tell their story. And so I think poetry is a little bit of journalism too, because you're reporting on what's going on.
Yeah.
Or you're reporting on the emotions or what's happening. So, but for me, when I'm working with someone and I'm pulling that poem out, I'm just asking them to be themselves.
Do you ask them to share it in front of others?
I do. Even if it's one
That's
line,
tough.
even if it's just one line, like we'll just go around the room. So,
Interesting.
because if one person holds back, then, but I do make everyone at least. Well, look, when I do a workshop, I ask 3 questions. What's the TV show that you should be on? A place that you'd like to go to, real and/or imaginary, and a pet that you would like to have. And so I see how people answer that. So and then people can say something, and then I see how they answer that, and I push on to the next.
Well, let's ask you those questions, Reggie.
Oh, okay.
Well, you already told us what show you want to be on, Miss Saigon.
No.
What TV show would you like to be on?
I would like to do the TV show hasn't happened, but I think
Of course, you would say that.
it's like a Project Runway, but it's a poetry runway where people have to write poems each challenge, and I want to be the Tim Gunn of that poetry runway show, where people have poetry challenges to write pieces and to perform them, and then I would sort of be the judge on the poem.
That seems like a show that should happen. That's like has Bravo all over it.
I mean, look, they don't have to work in a fabric store. They don't have any materials.
No, that sounds like a fabulous show. Let's produce it.
Let's do it. It just happened here first.
Right here, done.
Something like not poetry runway, but poetry something.
Yeah.
They have Top Chef, so why can't you do Top Poet?
I love it. What a great idea.
But that would be the show that I would like to be on.
Isn't that a little bit like the Def Poetry Jam that happened in New York?
No, because that was just
one.
That was just performances. There was no competition.
Yeah.
There was no elimination.
Right. You like that part, huh?
The elimination.
You're very Darwinian that way.
I am so Darwinian.
Yeah. So that's the show, which seems like we're gonna do. All right. So what's the other one? The
place that I would like to
place
go
you'd like to be,
real,
imaginary or real.
I think the moon.
Really, I wouldn't have thought of you as the moon guy.
Maybe some outer space thing, and then like a real place.
I see orchids around you.
Orchids.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I'm looking in my astrology to figure out where I should go. I think Paris is supposed to be good for me, although I have been to Paris, but I want to go back again and see.
When were you in Paris last?
It was like in the late 90s.
See, now you're a different man.
I'm a different man.
And Paris would be very different.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think you could take on Paris. Is Paris ready to take you on? That's it. And what pet?
I'd like a tarantula or a dolphin.
As a pet?
As a pet. I know it sounds weird with a tarantula, but then I could just watch it.
You just watch it moving around?
Watch it move. No, but speaking of, I like birds actually. I like birds and I like fish. I like all kinds of birds.
I see. Making it sound like
so I think like for me, I always get nervous when I read, meaning I don't know what I'm going to read. I have to be in the space and feel what I have to read the audience, and I think that's the hard part about performing your poems, because you're trying to find the right balance, like what do I feel like performing, and where's the audience at, right? And you don't want to give them a stale performance, and you don't want to. I try to make it as edgy as I can without falling off. I don't want to lose the audience. I'm not really gay. It's just a marketing strategy. I'm making too much money being gay. I cannot afford to be straight in these economic times. But I am in love with a woman, and her name is Nina Simone. Nina, look at the sky. April clouds hang a fat, sappy syrup on my saddest day. Played you Monday nights, my day unbearable as a wool coat in April. Came back to find my bed empty as a tire swing in winter. Nina, in my saddest hour, you have crooned me over a cruel block of loneliness, when unrequited love is an Italian bartender who flirts with you from the torso and offers you more lies than a tiramisu. Yes, Nina, Monday night I was so terribly sad, sadder than a parlor of long veils, carrying groceries up too many flights of stairs. And the sound of your voice, so full and broad-shouldered, made the day with all its drama into bangles and diamonds. Nina, you made me a culinary priestess. You placed a bojangling spell on me, singing above the sizzling oil as I pranced like a tiger among the tambourines and tin cans. The raindrops applauded, and the single wine glass wept because I found my inner Nina. Nina, Nubian Mona Lisa, woman painted with Egyptian mascara. You use silence the way a woman's figure made Jesus bend at the knees. Bend, ache, break to the will of your beautifully blessed contralto, crackling bittersweet as you held a phrase long enough for green finches to fly out the winter gloom. Nina, the storyteller. Nina, a river lonely as hell. Nina, tossed like an ark full of sparrows. You can honky-tonk the bones off Kali and steal the lightning from her toes. Listen, Nina, I think it's going to rain again. Human kindness is overflowing, flowing harder, even in the cruelest times. Every reading that I do, I try to treat it like a solo show. So I try to figure out how I'll end it. I'll figure out how do I want to start this, and what's the best route to go.
Now, you were in the Deaf Poetry Jam in New York, and I saw that piece. It's really good. How did you get involved in that?
They called me to be on second season. And I was excited to be on the show because slam poets, their work isn't really archived. And so this was a chance to be on television. You could make this a permanent thing. And people have watched that video. I was excited to do it. And then they said, Regie, you're going first. And I'm like, why? And I was not happy about it at all. And when you shoot in that condition, the chairs are set up so it looks like sharks. It looks cool in there, but the audience is right on you, and it's not comfortable whatsoever. So I read the Safe Filipino Identity poem first, and then I did the gay poem seconds. And there was this huge eruption of laughter. And I'm glad that happened, because it could have gone the other way. I figured out what kind of guys are attracted to me. Yeah, and like, people know me for that poem, and it still works.
Absolutely.
It still works.
People love identity poems because they see themselves, I think that's the key with those types of...
And those were the poems that scored high in the slam in the early 90s. Like, people of color, queer people, and women did well in the genre.
Yeah, I mean, those are voices that have not been out there, and I think that's what poetry can do as well, is bring out the voices of people that have not had a voice for a long time.
So I'm really excited to be a featured poet on Split This Rock. It's sort of like being in the Hall of Fame of political poets. And I have an outfit for my reading. I'm really excited about it. Last year when I hosted, I had my silver suit and I was discoing. I did a dance number. And this was with Yusef Komanyaka. And I introduced him and he did like a little Soul Train dance. So, because it's Split This Rock and why not? You know, that's not going to happen at your typical poetry reading, but Split This Rock isn't a typical poetry reading. It is the convergence of emerging poets and established poets.
How many poets are you going to have this year?
I'm not sure the number. It's going to be 16.
And about 500 people come from all over the country to experience this festival.
Yeah, there might be like 15, 16 poets.
Yeah.
People are coming from all around the world to come to this festival, and they can't wait because there's this spirit that always happens, and people make friends, and it becomes this solidifying, bonding moment.
And what's the dates, and how can people find out more about Split This Rock?
SplitThisRock.org, and it is Thursday through Sunday, April 13, 14, 15, 16. 14, 15, 16, 17th of April.
So it's straddling tax day.
Just tax day, so you can just...
I've always wanted to straddle tax day.
Yes.
Now we can all do it.
So...
Thank you so much, Regie.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks.